Welcome to this rapid fire session on improvement using Lean. I hope that all of you are here for this session and not for any other session. If you are, please find the correct room. We have a great panel lined up today. We have 5 speakers who will be each presenting for 15 minutes each. And each of them will give a brief one-line introduction about who they are, where they're from, before launching into their presentation. So there will be 5 presentations, 15 minutes each. And at the end, we will take questions. There are microphones scattered across the room. And if you have questions at the end, please line up at the microphones and ask the speakers your questions. My name is Gautam Suresh. I'm a neonatologist from the Dartmouth Institute in the United States, and I will be facilitating this session. So the first speaker we have is Manon Bruens. Please come up here. And she will be talking about optimal flow and patient preferences in an acute healthcare chain.
Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Manon Bruens, and I'm a researcher in the hospital group in Twente. It's in the Netherlands. I will gonna give you a presentation about the optimal flow and patient preferences in an acute healthcare chain. It's a new type of healthcare organization in the Netherlands where the GP post is integrated with the emergency department, and we call it the integrated emergency post. The integrated emergency post was started in April 2010 in Almelo, and because we have set up this new post, we don't know if we have set it efficient enough. So we started a research project from April 2011 till April 2013, together with the University of Twente, so that we can check whether this new organization was scientific efficient enough. And it's a cooperation also with the hospital group in Almelo and the General Practitioner post of Almelo. Where is Almelo seated? Here you see Paris, and right above you see the little red dot is Almelo. And the hospital group Twente has 2 hospitals in Almelo and Hengelo, and this research takes place in Almelo. And Almelo has a service area about 200,000 inhabitants, and the GP post in Almelo serves about 60,000 patients a year, of whom 25,000 actually physically visit the emergency of the GP post. And the ED in Almelo serves about 18,000 patients a year. The research goal of this research is to design an optimal process design at an integrated emergency post, so that the right patient is get the right care by the right caregiver. So he won't need expensive care at the emergency department if he has only a little slice in the finger, for example. And what's special about this research is that we also asked patients what they wanted if they have a question for an acute care. How is the acute care organized in the Netherlands? It's out of office hours. Then the GPs in a certain area have served together for out of office hours. If patients have an acute questions, patients can go to one office if they need acute care, but it's only low acute care, so only primary care, or patients can decide to go to the emergency department. So it also happens that patients with a low urgency go to the emergency department, while actually they could have been helped by a general practitioner. At the integrated emergency post, there's only one office where the patient goes, and then the patient is first triaged by a general practitioner. And the general practitioner assistant decides whether the patient can go home with an advice, or is needed to treat by a general practitioner, or he has actually need to go to the emergency department. And in Almelo, the case is that the general practitioner post is actually located within the hospital, and also the ED patients are registered at the same office. The research framework, so first we made a comparison of all the patients' flows before the integrated emergency post and after the integrated emergency post. We asked patients and the community of Twente what their preferences are when they have an acute care, and we used the best-worst scaling. I will explain that later to you. We designed a computer simulation model to test several interventions. And why we designed this computer simulation model? Because when you test interventions in real life, it is how do you call it? All events can happen, all different events can happen. And when you test it first in a simulation model, you know you can choose the best intervention first. And the last step we are going to take is to implement actually the intervention with the most positive impact. The comparison of the patient's flow is actually 1 year before the integration and 1 year after the integration, and we can make a comparison between those years because they have actually 52 weekends and 3 holidays on weekdays. The effect of the integrated emergency post on the general practitioner post, the amount of patients actually declined, but we think this is because of the swine flu in 2009. And at the moment we see that 2010 is comparable to 2008, and 2011 we see the same amount of patients as 2010 and 2008. So the amount of patients didn't increase a lot. The urgency, they expected that the U4 is the lowest urgency, and a little bit more patients with U3 came a year after the integration, but at the same time the general practitioner assistants were trained better to triage. So we don't know exactly if this is because of the integrated emergency post. Then at the consults we saw a decline in home visits, a decline in telephonic consult, but an increase in actually physical consult at the GP post. But it didn't increase in more workload for the general practitioners because there was a task shift from general practitioners to the general practitioner assistant and to physician assistant. Another thing is that now the GP post is actually in the hospital. The X-ray division is nearby. We saw a little increase of X-rays, but on the other hand, I will show that next to you, we also see a little increase in making of X-rays at the emergency department. The amount of emergency department, the patients declined as expected, especially with the surgical patients. The urgency did not change anything, so also the lower urgency patient did not change. Length of stay also didn't change. It was less than 2 hours and it's still less than 2 hours, so not a scientific effect on that. And the amount of X-ray actually increased more. But some remarks to this comparison is because we now have a new building with other facilities. There were some changes in clinical admissions, and there were some task shifts made. That's why we also built a computer simulation model to make a comparison in a controlled environment. Now I will talk to you about the results from the patient preferences. We used a discrete choice experiment using best-worst scaling. And this is when you ask, what do you prefer most? Hospital A, where you have to wait 4 hours but you're seen by a doctor, or Hospital B, where you have to wait half an hour but you're seen by a nurse. Patients visiting actually an integrated emergency post, patients visiting a normal emergency department, and the community of Almelo were asked. They were asked questions about the access of care, so do you have to make an appointment or do you can enter the building whenever you want? Attributes about the information about the expected waiting time, the type of caregiver, the actual waiting time, and the continuity of care. So are they seen by one doctor or by 5 different facilitators? The most important thing was the waiting time, and this was not influenced by urgency. So patients with low urgencies still like to be treated the fast way than other patients. Then we designed a computer simulation model. Here you see it actually running, and we used actually the hospital map for animation use so that nurses but also general practitioners and physicians recognize more what we have done. And so it's not only numbers and tables they see, but also they see the patients moving throughout the real department. And here we can build in interventions like seeing more GPs, or what happens if there are coming more patients, or what happens if we have less nurses. All kind of things. We can simulate this first before putting it into practice. What are we further going to do? We're going to identify key performance indicators. So we have to know what the simulation must perform as an output. We're going to then analyze the integrated emergency post in a controlled environment so that we also can show it to other Dutch hospitals what will be the effect of an integration with the general practitioner post. And we're going to also design organizational interventions with all the stakeholders. and also let the simulation model by itself make an optimization. Then the prepare of the interventions in the organization, implement and eventually adjust the simulation models. And all this is continually done with the researchers, with nurses, physician assistants, general practitioners, physicians itself. So summary of my presentation, this research was a cooperation between healthcare workers, researchers, specialized in operation management and health service research. It will give insight in the added value of an integrated emergency post, insight into what patients actually want if they have an acute care question, and what effect does organizational interventions has. And it's also a generic computer simulation model, not only usable for this integrated emergency post, but because we have put it up very generic, it can also be used for other fields in healthcare.
Oh, good. I'll try and keep still. My name's Demas Esberger. I'm a consultant in emergency medicine at the Queen's Medical Centre in Nottingham in England. It's a busy emergency department, sees approximately 151,000 new patients each year. And I've come to talk to you a little bit about using our lean methodology tools to improve patient flow and patient satisfaction within the department. I knew nothing about lean when I was asked to be the clinical lead for this project. We were asked to take it on first, the first department in the hospital, because we were seen to be having significant problems. Ever-increasing numbers of patients attending the department, a problem with our national target, which many of you will be aware about, to see patients within 4 hours, whether they're coming in to be admitted to hospital or discharged home. We have a target to see them all within 4 hours. So we were given the lean methodology to try and improve our patient experience and flow. And that's really, for me, what it's about. It's about improving the patient flow through the department, and here I'm just talking about the emergency department, but improving flow, but also improving the care of those patients, not just sending them home. And for me, lean's core principle is actually ensuring everything we do in the department for the patient actually adds a value. And it was a bit of an eye-opener to me when we actually sat down and looked at it from a patient perspective and said, what do patients value? What are the value-added steps in their care? We thought, for example, well, a value-added step is when they book in at the reception desk. Well, actually, that's of no value whatsoever to a patient. We really came down with 3 things: diagnosis, treatment and care. Those are the important added value steps for the processes in our department. So the next lean principle we jumped upon was the idea of reducing waste. So everything that doesn't add value must be a waste. And I've got a slide in a moment that will describe all of those wastes. So we're looking for an improvement in flow, giving added value and reducing waste. We realised that if we approached this just as a short project, once it had finished and we'd implemented change, it wouldn't be long before we went back to our good old ways, or we didn't continue to improve. So lean is very important in providing the culture that enables you to continue to improve and sustain your improvement. So the 8 wastes that are talked about in lean are listed here. I've deliberately highlighted 5 of them that I thought putting into the emergency department were the really important ones. You've got waiting. That could be waiting for the patient. That's an obvious one. Waiting around in between each process of care. How many steps of care do they have? If they have a lot of steps of care, they have a lot of waits in between each step. But it became waiting for the staff that work in the department. We were finding in our department, when we got a certain number of patients, for example, in our adult trolley area, the doctors were having to wait because there was no patient in a cubicle who needed to be seen. They were full of patients who'd been seen, were waiting for something else. Then we'd have to wait to get onto a computer to actually select the patient we were going to see. And if we wanted to look at an X-ray on our lovely new digital system, we'd queue at the X-ray console waiting to have a look at that. And so there's lots of waits, both for patients and doctors. And we needed to analyse this. We then had over-processing, and this may be common to many departments. We thought, when a patient came in, if the first nurse who saw them did their assessment, did all the tests that they thought they could possibly need while they're in the department, by the time they got to see a doctor or a nurse practitioner, then all the tests would have been done, and that would improve the process. But we got to the stage that the nurses were doing every test they could think of, and they were doing far too many tests, far too many blood tests, particularly things like D-dimers and CRPs and groups and saves on patients who'd had a trickle of a nosebleed. So we were wasting a lot of money. Far too many tests. And if you think about it, doing tests to patients, putting Benfloms in patients, it's all patient harm. So we were really over-processing. We showed that quite clearly. Another waste we found was what's known as rework. So for all of the tests that the nurses had done at the initial assessment, when the doctor came to see them, they decided they needed another test. So they'd have to have another blood test and wait another hour or however long for that to come back. So there was a lot of reworking going on. And then there was motion. This may ring a bell with some of you, but certainly now in our clinical environment, you might go and see a patient in a cubicle, and then you discover, I need a tendon hammer. And there isn't one, so you wander off and find a tendon hammer, and you come back and you do that. Now I need to look in their eyes. Oh, there's no ophthalmoscope that's working in this room. And we'd find a number of times doctors were walking up and down the department looking for bits of equipment. And we actually monitored this and timed it and showed there's a huge amount of wasted time. And I suppose a big one that Lean brought to me was not using resource. And here, for me, I'm talking about the human resource in the department. And that's doctors, that's nurses, but that's receptionists, that's cleaners or domestics, however you like to call them. Everybody in there has an opinion, has an idea, is a resource that really needs to be used. And for me, so those were the main 5 of the 8 wastes which made a significant effect on our processes. What we were trying to achieve, the expected outcomes, pretty self-evident really. We were looking to improve clinical outcomes. If we improve clinical outcomes, we're improving patient experience. If we improve clinical outcomes and patient experience, we'll improve staff satisfaction. So in emergency departments, the annual turnover of nursing staff is usually around 15%. And in our department, it was getting up to 20 and 25%. So improve your staff satisfaction, you will have a decreased turnover of staff and they'll enjoy coming to work. Certainly there was an element of value for money, and in some respects some of the things we did save a significant amount of money. I believe one of my colleagues later will mention this. What we also expected to come out of it, and a big learning point for us, was teaching and education. You can have a change program, lean program, call it whatever you want, and you can come up with all these great ideas to change the process, but it takes a lot of teaching and education of your staff to then actually be able to use those processes consistently 24 hours a day. And we also expected and have found that it increased the amount of research we're able to do in the department. We've been inflicted, I would use the word, with change in our department for over 20 years that I've been there, because we've always been a problem. We've had outside agencies come in, consultants with their clipboards for 2 weeks to watch us and talk to us, produce a report for the hospital and tell us what we're doing wrong. I was sick to death of it. It's happened 3 to 4 times in my time there. And whatever they've said, it may have been a good idea, but nothing ever worked. So the change program, the lean methodology, accepts that we will come up with the best ideas, and that will be all of the staff I previously mentioned, and importantly the patients themselves. It accepts that the ideas will come from in your own department, not from outside it. And it also accepted that we'd need time to do it properly. One of our agencies that helped us with the lean process said something which struck a chord with me. It said 100% of successful change programs have a good idea. Well, that should be obvious. But 90% of unsuccessful ones also had a good idea. And the difference is quite straightforward. It's all about staff engagement, engaging your own staff. So we spent a lot of time engaging our own staff. And I show you this photograph just to give you an idea about what I mean by staff. So the chap standing up in the middle with his hand up in the air is an IT deputy director of our trust. And he came to realise during this process that the IT department shouldn't just invest in new technology and give us it to use. It should come to us and ask us what technology we wanted to use so we could actually help with that process. It seemed to be enlightening to him. It seemed damn obvious to most of us. So he's there. The chap with the blonde hair to the left of the photograph is a data analyst. We discovered we had loads of data. We had virtually no data that was any use, so we had to get a lot of data. We've got radiographers in there, we've got nurses, we've got nurse practitioners, we've got consultants, we've got junior doctors. Everybody who we thought would be important, we engaged. And we were able to take our time. So we had a discovery phase, 8 weeks, where we actually didn't do anything on the shop floor. We engaged staff. We came up with the ideas by talking to staff about change. We created the right environment for staff to believe that they could change the process. And many of us, more than 50% in the department, actually had some training in the lean methodology to help it work. And it wasn't until phase 2 that we actually started trialling things, and we weren't scared of getting it wrong. And we were very careful. So the first trial in our adult trolley area, we were very worried it would cause absolute chaos to the rest of the department. So we only did it for 4 hours on one of the quietest days, and we slowly built up our trials and learnt from each one of them until we got to the stage where we thought we had the process right, and we go on to what is rollout, actually implementing the change, and importantly, improving it across the whole department, measuring its success and making sure it was established and kept on going. A busy slide. This is what our adult trolley area. Just to show you, we did actually 8 trials before we thought we'd come up with something that was right. And since then, we've changed it again with this continuous improvement. And it just looks at the numbers of patients in our adult trolley area as a baseline and when we had the trials. And to give you an idea, our adult trolley area has 18 cubicles. So you can see the baseline for the 6th trial, we had 40 patients in that area. So the yellow columns show that we significantly improved the numbers of patients in there. We learnt lots of lessons. What went really well was staff engagement. They could say what they wanted to say. We took them seriously. They enjoyed seeing the trial results, the communication of those. And we had consultant buy-in. We have 16 consultants, and we got most of them to buy in. Some of them, unfortunately, were quite negative, some of the staff, but just a minority, so we had the vast majority on side. A cynic, I was told once by an American, was somebody who had given up but not shut up. And we certainly had a few of those in our department, but we managed to get around those. So we've got a different culture now. It does feel different. We've learnt new skills. We can build structures, give clear roles and responsibilities to our patients. That went very well. We were able to have resource to do it. We were given time out of our day jobs to do this for a considerable period of time. It's allowed us to show the trust, actually, that we haven't got enough resource in our department. Just recently, we've been given more than £1 million for additional nursing staff and clinical support workers at a time when our hospital is trying to save £40 million in 1 year. And we've also been able to show the physical environment is wrong, and we've actually had some building works on the back of this lean programme. So it's worked very well for us. There were some negatives, as I mentioned, a few negative staff. At times, getting enough people off the shop floor to do the work was difficult. Our timescales slipped because it was more difficult than we thought. We needed more trials than we thought. You can never communicate well enough with your staff. We learned that. We tried very hard, but we could have done better. And it's not future-proof. And every year we get 5,000 or 6,000 more patients. It makes the processes under greater and greater strain. So you have to continue to change and adapt to the new circumstances. But for us, at the end, a really learning point for us was patience, patience. Don't ever lose sight of your... Oh, I'm going the wrong way now, sorry. don't ever lose sight of what your goal is at the end, and that's the patient. And I'll finish there. Thank you very much.
Hello, bonjour and good day. I'm an Australian registered nurse and I live and work in Nottingham, have done for 5 years. I was the project lead for the Emergency Department Change Programme, which Demas just talked about. What I'm going to talk about is something a bit different though, rather than just being about the lean methodology, but is actually probably where we're at now, is embedding the continuous improvement in the busy emergency department. You're supposed to laugh at the title here. 2.5 years' work in 15 minutes isn't the easiest topic to talk about. But just quickly, I will give you a bit about OED demographics. Talk about the improvement program structure, because I think that's probably how we've started to embed our continuous improvement. The benefit of real-time trials, which Demas touched on, and that balance between process redesign and lean really going very heavily on process, but lean also goes heavily on your resource and your people, your staff, and your patients being at the centre of that, and finding that nice balance. So, as Demas said, we see in the department where we work, which is adults and paediatrics combined, about 151,000. The extra, to take it up to 182,000 in 2011, was eye casualty. So we actually have a separate eye casualty department. We serve a population of 2.5 million, and we're seeing an average of 450 to 500 patients a day. I have kind of worked all over the world, and I do think that's pretty busy. There's not many departments that are that busy, and I think the problems that we saw are probably the problems that most departments see, but exemplified by the fact that we are that busy. Project methodology. We used a 5-step plan, or the change programme at Nottingham uses a 5-step plan, which goes through, and I quickly do them now, but I talk more about them in the presentation as well, is set up and plan is the first step. And for us, 2.5, nearly 3 years ago, that started with the advertisement of the jobs. So my job was a secondment as a project lead. Demas was also resourced for some of his clinical time to be non-clinical and work on it as the clinical lead. We also set up a hub. And it's a nice little word, but what we asked of the department is for them to give us a room, a decent-sized room with lots of wall space, and invest in some computer and some IT and some smart technology in there. We asked for it to be in the department because we recognised with how busy we weren't going to get people off the shop floor for long. So we wanted them to be able to drop in and drop out. And I guess when you talk about embedding continuous improvement, and Demas's slide before about the picture of staff engagement, I do think the majority of our success was on the fact that our hub was there in the department and everyone had to be involved. People dropped in, they gave their ideas, they gave their concerns, their woes, their worries, everything. There were tears, there were smiles, there were, clapping sessions, there were hugs. But the hub was integral to part of our success in ED. Again, we moved then on to the discovery stage, and a bit about what I'd say here is timelines and pushing them out and letting them slip. What we realised is that at about 5 weeks, we had 8 weeks for discovery. At about 5 weeks, we had a load of data. We use a computer system in our ED system. We are computerised. A load of data, but geez, did we have any analysis or intelligence on that data, or enough for us to go comfortably forward? So we asked for our timelines to be pushed. And I think it was the best thing we did. We got a data analyst on board in our team by about week 6, week 7, and our discovery phase pushed out to 11 weeks. Again, we're still not on the shop floor yet. Then we moved into design and trial, and I told you I'd talk about some real-time trials. When you talk about staff engagement being a success of continuous improvement, I'm not sure you cannot have staff engagement if you do real-time trials and if you do them continuously over different times. Demas is right. We did them, first of all, because we were scared. Also, the department was scared. We did them on quiet days. We did them for short amounts of time, 4 hours. We then built that up to 8 hours on quiet days. We built it up to 8 hours on a busy day, 12 hours on a busy day, 24 hours on a busy day. We pushed that out to a week-long trial, hoping to move into implementation, which is the fourth step in the project methodology that we used. Implementation seems like you should pat yourself on your back and sit down in the hub and say, yay, we're done now. But I think what we realised was that implementation led on to continuous improvement and embedding that change, and the fact that we then had to question whether what we'd done was right. For a department our size, I just wanted to give you an idea of how we broke it up. We broke it into adults and peds, and then each stream replicated each other. So there was majors or trolley patients in adults, there was minors, there was a primary care stream, there was the resus room as well, and paediatrics had the same. And then the overarching work streams were the information systems, so our IT systems, and a demand to capacity, which kind of fits in with the resource thing that I said you need to get the balance right. Each work stream had a project champion. Each project champion then had an assortment of team members, and they weren't all consultants, let me tell you, the project champions. They were a mixture from Band 5 staff nurses to Band 7 sisters to emergency nurse practitioners to consultants. We had people on the team who were our porters, our receptionists. We made our work streams and our project teams quite strong, and I think that goes into embedding our continuous improvement as well. I don't have time to talk about every project that we've done, so what I've brought to you today is a bit about our majors problem on the adult side. And two fairly graphic pictures, certainly the one with people waiting in the middle is quite tender to myself, and I'm sure to Demas as well, in the fact that it's a broken system. As Demas said, there's 18 cubicle in our majors area on the adult side, and you can see what happens when those 18 cubicles are full. And those patients in the middle might be waiting assessment, or they might be waiting to move on to the wards. The other picture on that slide is a value stream map, current state mapping, whatever you want to call it. But I can't stress how important, and everyone will have done them, anyone who's involved in change and lean and trying to make changes in your department or area of work. The power of these is actually to have them in a central area, and the power of these is to have different people to come in and work on them. What you can't see is probably the green starbursts, and the green starbursts were people's, patients, staff's idea of actually the problems and how they could solve them. What you also can't see is at the top we've done a bit of experience-based design here, and what we asked was what our patients were feeling at certain steps during their majors flow. And then we asked what the staff, nurses and doctors thought their patients were feeling and the gaps between them. Twofold, it certainly told us that one, what we were going to design needed to answer those patients' concerns, but it also is a bit of an in-your-shoes event for our staff to actually realise sometimes there was a discrepancy between what their patients were feeling and what they thought they were feeling. Trials to implementation in majors, as Demas showed some graphical evidence of it before, we did 8 trials. We used the Plan, Do, Study, Act improvement cycle. We did 3 to 4 flows, just to let you know. We had a future state event, and of that future state event we designed this magical way of new working, and from that it was the staff and the patient feedback that led to that, and also latest national trends regarding rapid front door assessment and consultant senior triage at the front door. So our first flow was something that replicated what we designed. I think we got 347 ideas or concerns from that first 4-hour trial in a quiet period. Our job as the project team was to answer every concern and to communicate those answers back and to redesign actually what we were going to trial second time, which is why we went through about 3 or 4 trials, 3 or 4 flows before we actually got to our 8th trial. And we thought by this stage we were getting less concerns at the end of the 7th trial, and we thought what we got was something that was answering somewhat of our problem. So what we did was a week-long trial, and at the end of that week, we were honest about it. We hoped that that was going to be our new way of working in the majors area. And it was. We continued working. that way that we started. So we asked ourselves, implementation completed, but problems not solved. What do we do? And this is where I'm talking about implementation. You think it's sit down, pat yourself on the back, yay, job well done. Not really. It's kind of when you actually sit back down, don't let your team disseminate, your team stays together, and you ask them to reevaluate. You do another discovery, you go back to step 2 in the 5-step plan. And you ask that in that discovery phase, what's going on, what's out there, what do we need to look at? You go back to your patients, go back to all your staff, and you do it all again. You're a bit quicker this time. Also at this time in England, just to let you know, 2011 April was the 8 quality indicators for emergency care, so it wasn't just the 4-hour target. That's what else was coming our way basically in the next month. So we wanted to look at those. Patients were still telling us they were waiting too long, and they weren't having, and we knew they weren't having standardised care. So we continued to implement, we continued to trial, we asked permission to do more little trials amongst our majors area, and we had some success stories, and I guess the biggest success story, and the reason why I'm presenting today, is that the team continues, and it continues to work, it continues to do more trials, it continues to discover what needs to be done. Some processes are stabilised, and I've got some examples of that to show you, and they've improved. And some benefits were realised. Others were recognised to need more resource. So the next couple of slides are basically about the improvement benefits. Time to initial assessment, which came in April 2011 as one of our new measures. Standardisation of care and reduction in investigations, as well as a new staffing budget. I think it's a pretty obvious graph, what I put up there, the time to initial assessment. And just to let you know, we went away from a consultant at the front door doing our initial assessment. We decided that with the right designed initial assessment tools, which we call IATs, senior nurses and clinical support workers could actually work our initial assessment unit. What you can't see on the graph, because I didn't supply you back before 2010, was that the process was worse before this graph, what you can't see on this graph. We then implemented, at the beginning of this graph is our week-long implementation, and then when you see the rapid step change is April 2011, when our team did our new discovery and implemented a separate initial assessment unit run by nurses and clinical support workers using initial assessment tools. And I guess the last bit of the graph, which is a little bit more sensitive, but if you have a look from the beginning of this year, so sort of the last 7 data points, we're actually under the green line, which our goal is to be under 20 minutes, and it leads to actually matching that resource and process. Because what we asked for at the end of last year, with a lot of information, a lot of data and a lot of power, because we'd done this process, was to increase our staffing. Quickly, before I go on to the increase of staffing, I just wanted to show you how we did standardise our care. I know it's a busy slide. The picture on the right is just a scanned-in example of one of our IATs for shortness of breath. It works on a presenting complaint problem, and it guides the nurse or the clinical support worker through that and guides them to what investigations they actually need done, touching on what Demas talked about before about over-processing and the 4 hours kind of making us doing this big block of investigations. The run chart shows you the count of bloods and x-rays in our majors area, which is called Area 3. Which has decreased. And just to let you know, the savings at the moment per week on investigations, bloods and x-rays is £7,500. We haven't costed into that the resource of the staff doing the bloods and the x-rays or the resource of the consumables. That's just £7,500 that we're saving each week on our attendances by standardising our care. And finally, as I talked before about finding that nice balance between process redesign, which Lean is very heavily on, but remember, at the centre of Lean is your staff and your patients. And we realised, and we had a lot of data to support it, that we'd got a pretty slick process, and we thought we're pretty good at this initial assessment. What wasn't getting us over the line was the fact that we were understaffed. And I guess anyone who's working in healthcare at the moment understands the fiscal financial restraints on us. And in December last year, to go to our board to say, could we have £1 million to invest in our nursing budget, was hard, but to have the answer back in 2 weeks to say yes you could was really reassuring and successful for our project. With that, just to let you know, we were clever. We introduced new roles. It wasn't just nursing. We looked at clinical support roles. We looked at new shift patterns to match our demand to capacity. And the biggest thing also, when you talk about engagement, is what this has done to the staff on the shop floor is shown that change, lean, continuous improvement actually does answer the problems of the patient and the problems of the staff. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, it's a pleasure to be here with you today. I think you're getting English from England, Australia, now America, so hopefully you can follow all these different accents. I am here today to talk to you about our journey in Lean. We've been going at this seriously for about 3 years, and I hope that at the end of my presentation you will see some hope for you if you are implementing Lean, and if you are considering it, that you will seriously consider it, because I think it works, and I'm very excited about it. By show of hands, how many of you have a hospital-wide Lean implementation? A few, okay. How many have just 1 or 2 departments in your hospital that are doing Lean instead of the whole thing? How many of you are considering doing Lean? All right. And how many of you hope to never see Lean enter your hospital ever? Couple hands, okay. Well, I've subtitled this, Do All Roads Lead to Rome? Because you're all on this journey, and it's different. There's no defined way to do this, and I'm going to talk about how we've approached it. Who are we? I'm part of the North region of Intermountain Healthcare. We have 3 hospitals in the top of Utah in USA, and we're part of a larger 20-hospital system. Our larger system, while they teach a lot of Lean principles, is not implementing Lean. It is only our region and led by our Chief Executive Officer of our region. We have a large, a medium, and a small hospital, and we are trying to implement Lean in all 3 of those hospitals, and that's quite a challenge with several thousand employees that we're trying to involve in this. I saw so many familiar things as Manon and Demas and Amber talked about their projects. 3 main components of Lean as you implement it. It's culture. It's very much culture. It's management systems. And it's tools. And if you think about it, really, we are looking at the holy grail of Toyota, who didn't set about to produce Lean. It's just simply the way that they are. It's their culture. It's their management systems. And they have developed tools to help them with what they do, manufacturing cars. And we're trying to adapt that to a hospital. And really, we are trying to convert an existing culture, which all of your hospitals have, to a Lean culture that mimics more the type of culture that you see at Toyota, for example, or other places that have implemented Lean. You are trying to push out some of your old management systems and replace them with Lean management systems, or systems that support Lean. And finally, you're adapting and putting into place some of the tools of Lean. And all of those things, as they come together and you push out the old, you've become a Lean organization that has adopted culture, management systems, and tools. One of the flaws that I've seen in organizations trying to implement Lean is that they focus on the tools. That really is, in my opinion, the last thing to focus on, and is the last thing that we have focused on. We have recently hired a director of Lean implementation who's come to us from an airbag manufacturer in our city. They have been doing Lean for 12 years, and he was taught for 2 years by a gentleman from Toyota, from Japan, on Lean principles. And the thing that they emphasized most was the management systems. As I said, there's various approaches. We see some organizations that teach lean tools in classes. We've seen some hospitals and others who just bring in consultants. And I like when Demas said, let's not have consultants, let's us do it. We chose not to go the consultant route. We've seen some who just focus on big projects. Let's show the big project and how lean we are. Or some of them, as you raise your hand, start in one department and try to spread from there. And I've seen others that just have slogans and talk a lot about continuous quality improvement, trying to involve staff with ideas. There's many, many approaches, but let me tell you about how we started and what we did. We started with our management systems. This was led by our Chief Executive Officer, and from the top down, he asked the management first to implement some lean systems. We do leader standard work, where leaders have consistent things that they need to do daily, weekly, or monthly even. We also implemented leader rounding, where leaders have to go to the work area and engage with the employees to see what's happening, to find out what they're involved in, what ideas they have been working on, and to actually go out to the work site. We worked, too, on our culture. We've called it I squared, innovate and improve. When the gentleman from Toyota came to Autoleave in Ogden, Utah to help them implement lean, he said, you are not Toyota, you are Autoleave. You will have your own system. And that's exactly what our hospital is finding. We will have our own system, and we've called it I squared, innovate and improve, to help our employees see what we are trying to accomplish. So to implement our culture, we have idea boards. I'm going to talk more about that to get all of our employees involved. We have metric boards to have transparency of our goals and results. We have daily huddles. Actually, every shift in our nursing floors have a huddle. And we've tried to implement PDSA thinking. So some of our results from implementing lean. One of our biggest successes has been our idea program. I hate to call it a program, really. It's trying to become a culture where every employee can share with us their ideas for improving our key processes. The red lines are the number of implemented improvement ideas, and the blue lines are the number of employees who have implemented ideas. You see in 2011 that we had just less than 2,000 employees, individual employees, who submitted ideas to improve their work processes. If you remember the slide where I showed the total number of full-time equivalents, we have several thousand more employees than this. So there's many, many employees who have not submitted any ideas yet, and we hope that they will all do so. We've set our sights to go even higher. We've set a goal for ourselves in 2012 to have over 5,000 implemented ideas, new ideas, for 2012. This is the actual card that we use. It's a simple little card on pads that we've printed. An employee can pull these off, and we do not track every single idea. We just simply track, the title and that it was implemented. We don't try to estimate the impact that it had monetarily or in other ways. We let that speak for itself in their processes. So this is an example where Trish saw that the biohazard buckets were not tall enough for the operating room to put their equipment in. Handles stick out, and her suggestion was to get different types of buckets that would actually do the job correctly. That's a very simple idea, and we have many thousands that add up to changes in our processes. So we wanted 100% involvement through idea boards and rounding. This is a picture of an actual idea board. Every department in the hospital has an idea board where the cards can go through a process of going from idea to to-dos to doing and done. And so cumulatively, we've had over 9,500 ideas. And it's been a huge success. Employees love to get engaged. Our Gallup Q12 employee engagement scores are up sharply, and we attribute much of that to their involvement and engagement. They know the work best, and we need to rely on them to help us improve our processes. We've had much performance transparency. We have scorecards in our huddles. The shift lead or department manager can talk about their results for that day or for that week and really help to solidify and embed standard processes in their departments. Leadership accountability, I talked to you about where we started with there. Every leader has standard work routines, and we check on important processes as leaders. We've had over 100 large-scale improvement projects led by management engineers, department heads, and even employees themselves. We're using the A3 and PDSA approaches to improving processes. And we are just starting this year to do more training on lean theory and lean tools. We've had site visits to some healthcare organizations that have implemented lean for many years: ThedaCare in Wisconsin, Virginia Mason in Seattle, Denver Health in Denver, Colorado, and then many local manufacturers that do lean. Autoliv I talked about. O.C. Tanner makes jewelry. Pepperidge Farms is a food manufacturer, and there are others. So the results, we've had great results. It's exciting. We still don't have everybody. If you went into one of our hospitals and asked one of our employees, what's I squared, I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if people said, I'm not sure. Culture change is hard. It takes many years to change culture. But we've had some great results so far. In 2011, we had an impact of $3 million in annual operating cost changes due to our projects. Many of those come from length of stay improvements or reducing quality errors. We had a project that reduced the number of urinary tract infections on one of our units to near zero, and that reduction saves length of stay, obviously improves the quality of care for the patient, and saves us money. So here's an example of a couple of big projects. At our Logan Medical Center in Logan, Utah, they were spending 35% of their time, the nurses, in patient rooms. They felt that that could be improved. By working together to see where they could improve, where they had supplies. Demas talked about motion. When you go out of the room to find supplies, you're not with the patient. You're wasting time looking for things. 5S activities, checklists of what to do when you're in the room, in-room charting and other process changes resulted in time at the bedside has increased now to 54%. I think that's a win for the patient and for the nurses. Everybody's satisfied with that. At McCady Hospital, nurses, respiratory therapists, pharmacists, and others were not always on the same page when it came to working with our cardiovascular patients. And so they sat down to standardize some of these processes, what each of those disciplines would do with the patients, and they defined it on a custom care plan that would then be reviewed every day, and people got on the same page, the same approach, and we did not do this to save length of stay or to save time. We did this to improve the quality of their work and their satisfaction in their work, to have less confusion. What we saw was that the length of stay reduced. They weren't even anticipating that because everything got done with less waiting time, less confusion. The patients and the staff are more satisfied. So our lean journey in 2006, we visited Autoliv, an airbag manufacturer. We said this might work in our hospitals. And we are so excited to have brought this now to our hospitals because it is working. It's helping to improve care and lower costs for our community, which is so very important. We tried it with one project, implementing room service, meaning patients could order whatever food they wanted to be delivered to their room. And that helped us to implement a lower cost room service than it would have otherwise been, in my opinion. We piloted it in 2008. We rolled it out, our management system, region-wide in 2009, and have been going going strong for 3 years. Now we are focusing on education and training and trying to continue to bring our leaders up to speed. So, what lessons have we learned in the North region of Intermountain Healthcare? First, lean works. You've heard it from these other speakers. You've seen it in your hospitals. It works. If you haven't started lean, I hope that your CEO will say to you, let's do lean. It really is most importantly about culture, not those tools. It is changing the culture. And for that to happen, your top leaders have to be involved and must lead the change. I do not believe it would work in our region if our Chief Executive Officer was not as passionate about it as he is. And the other healthcare organizations that we went and visited, they have the same thing. Their Chief Executive Officers, whether they be physicians or administrators, are leading that and are passionate about it. Every process can be improved, ladies and gentlemen. Even our implementation of lean could be improved upon. I hope you will go back and implement lean even better than anywhere else has ever done it. We've only just begun. I hope that you will begin soon and have great success. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Saimah Arif. I'm a consultant histopathologist at Whipscross Hospital in London, now part of Barts Healthcare. And also since March 2011, I've been working as a national clinical lead in association with NHS Improvement. And in my national role, I've been promoting implementation of lean in histopathology throughout England, and also have been involved in setting up a training programme in service improvement using lean methodology for junior doctors. So this afternoon I'm going to present to you 4 lean tools, and as a background I'm going to use our improvement journey in histopathology at Whips to illustrate how the tools can be used and to give you some examples. So a bit of background: Whips is a district general hospital located in North East London, serving a population of 350,000. The histopathology department was selected as one of 9 pilot sites to work with NHS Improvement to implement lean. And the project started in September 2009. We had a year's support from NHS Improvement, and essentially a consultant came, trained all of the staff in lean methodology, showed us how to implement the tools, but actually using the tools and doing the improvement was up to the staff in the department. This slide summarises our results. Our main outcome measure was turnaround time, histopathology specimen turnaround time. This was measured end to end, so the clock started when the sample was taken from the patient and ended when the result was available to the requesting clinician. And it was measured in calendar days. So our baseline, as you can see, at the start of the project we were turning around 11% of specimens in 3 days and 46% in 7 days. We now sustainably turn around 40% plus specimens in 3 days and 90 to 95% of specimens within 7 days. And this improvement is solely due to implementation of lean. We did not have extra staff. In fact, we had a slight reduction in staffing, and coupled with a slight increase in workload. Okay, so the 4 lean tools that I've chosen to talk about are these. I've chosen the first 3 because they actually are essential for anybody starting out on their lean journey. They're the starting points. And the 4th tool, A3 thinking, is something that we found very useful. It's a brilliant tool for problem solving and giving your improvement project structure and format. Whilst I'm going to keep mentioning the word specimen, being a pathologist, these tools are generic and can be applied to any patient pathway. Okay, so the first tool, the Gimbal Walk. Gimbal is a Japanese word which means the actual or real place where value is created. Also termed a go-see exercise, a specimen pathway walk, patient pathway walk, or a waste walk. And the aim of the Gimbal Walk is to visualise the value stream. The value stream is the series of steps that every specimen or patient has to flow through, and it's the sum of the value add and non-value add steps that there are. So you have to decide what the value-add steps in a process are and what's value-add from the perspective of the customer. And who is your customer? Ultimately the patient, but perhaps in pathology more immediately the clinician is the customer that we liaise with. But in addition, there are lots of internal customers throughout the process that need to be considered as well. Everything else is considered waste, and Lean, as you've heard, focuses on this value stream, minimising the waste and thereby improving the quality of the process and improving the value stream. So who needs to go on this walk? Everybody needs to go. A representative from across the pathway was selected to be part of the improvement team. In addition, our Chief Operating Officer, a representative from finance, a representative from human resources, from IT, a clinical service user. We all went on our Gimbal Walk together at the start of our project. You have to walk the process end to end, from when the sample is taken to the final report being received by the clinician, following not only the specimen or the patient, but also the flow of information. It's a good idea to take a camera to create a photographic record of your journey, and really to go with no preconceptions in your mind. What often happens is that people who are working in a multi-step process know very well what goes on in their part of the process, but are either oblivious or have misunderstandings of what else goes on elsewhere in the pathway, and also of what impact what they do has on the other parts of the pathway. This is an observational exercise rather than a problem-solving exercise, and any questions that you ask are really asked just with the aim of finding out what happens, certainly not to try and solve the problems or criticise in any way. And it's quite easy for staff to feel scrutinised and picked upon, and it's important to reassure them and reinforce all the time that it's the process that you're interested in rather than the person. And any problems that are identified can be approached later systematically using data as evidence. And this is not a one-off exercise to do at the start of your project. It's something to be repeated as and when appropriate, because your process is changing as you improve it, and so you need to do this walk again and again to look for further improvement opportunities, and therefore it becomes an important tool for sustaining your lean culture as well. So this is how we eventually portrayed our specimen walk or Gimbal Walk, using photographs from the different parts of the journey, and also some photographs of the different examples of waste that we saw on the journey. So the Gimbal Walk really goes hand in hand with value stream mapping, and you've already seen an example of this. The value stream map adds the data, adds the evidence to what you've seen on your Gimbal Walk, and taken together they provide the baseline from which you start your lean journey. So to start constructing a value stream map, you establish your start and end points. Determine what are the major steps in your process, and this is a high-level look at the process. So you need to condense all the steps into 6 to 8 major process steps, and focusing on what we call the green stream, the pathway that most specimens or most patients follow, because there will be a small proportion of specimens or patients which will deviate from the main process. You then add the external agencies, the GP, the hospital ward, and your customer. The data flows, both paper and electronic. And the relationship between each step of the process, is there a batch and push system in operation, or is the work flowing through in a pull fashion? Then you add the measurements. When we first constructed our value stream map, it was shortly after undertaking the Gimbal Walk. We didn't really have very much data. We found it hard to fill in many of the data boxes, and we were estimating. But it's really important to go away and actually collect the accurate data that is required to populate the value stream map. Otherwise, you'll be basing your improvement on perception rather than fact. You add in both the process times, which is the cycle time or the touch time, and the waiting in between, which are the waste times. What is waiting in between the steps? The inventory, and that could be patients, specimens, request forms. The number of operators required at each process step to move the patient or specimen through. And then finally, you do the calculation, which is the touch or cycle time, all of those value add bits added together, divided by the lead time, which is the value add plus the non-value add. And you end up with a value added ratio. So this is our very first value stream map. Our value added ratio was 1.5%, which sounded horrifying to us, because what it was saying was that only 1.5% of that specimen's journey was actually value add, and the rest was all waste. But we were then reassured that actually this was pretty typical of a process that had not yet undergone any improvement. When we repeated our map at the end of the year, our value added ratio was 15%, and that's considered reasonably good in improvement terms. I must just emphasise that a lot of focus and stress is often put on getting the measurements right, putting the right symbols on, making it look pretty, but actually the real value of doing a value stream map is that discussion group that you have at the beginning when you're constructing the map. It was the same team that undertook the Gimbal Walk, a multidisciplinary team with representation from across the pathway, that sat down in a room one afternoon for 3 hours and thrashed out, actually, was this process push, was it pull, what was value add, what wasn't, what constitutes a defect at each step. And those are the sorts of discussions you want to engender when you're constructing this map, which is the reason that someone else can't come in and do a value stream map for you. It's the team that works within the process that needs to construct the value stream map. And once you've finished it, you can make it electronic and make it look much prettier. So to summarise, it's a high-level observational exercise. It identifies waste and quantifies it. It shows the linkage between the different material and information flows. And it's a great tool, as I've said, to get all the staff involved and participating in the improvement programme and generating ideas, because as you've already heard, and I fully agree, the best ideas come from the staff that work within the process itself. It's a great tool for looking at, well, where could we have a quick win? Could we redesign this part of the process? Would this immediately lead to a good result? What are the priorities? Where are the biggest weights? Where are the biggest bottlenecks? What should we approach first? And finally, what does the future look like? Because what I've been talking about is current state value stream mapping, and at some point teams will be ready to go on and map out the future state. What do they want their process to look like? Okay, moving on to statistical process control charts, and again, you've already seen a couple of these. And you've heard about the importance of data in improvement to identify, quantify problems and to prove that you've actually improved a process rather than just changing it. So these were first described in Stewart in the 1920s, who was investigating 40 telephone lines, and he described the variation that's inherent in processes. And the Spc chart is what he used to demonstrate the variation. So it's a type of run chart, and the real value of an Spc chart is to show that variation and capability within a process. He described two kinds of variation: common cause and uncommon cause, and special cause. Common cause variation is normal, it's expected, it's within the boundaries of the process, and to reduce it you need to improve the process. Special cause variation is unexpected, unpredictable, falls outside the boundaries of the process, and needs root cause analysis to eliminate or reduce it, not changing the process. So this is what it looks like. The x-axis is the time, y-axis is your measure, so in our case it would be the specimen turnaround time, and each dot on that chart represents a specimen. The two red lines are the upper and lower control limits, each 3 standard deviations away from the mean, and the zigzagging reflects the common cause variation, and then these points, which fall outside the upper and lower control limits, are the special cause variation. And what we're aiming to do with improvement is to eliminate and reduce the special cause variation, minimise the common cause variation so that these two lines are coming closer together, and make that line as flat as we can, as well as reducing the mean, so that we have a guaranteed, predictable process which is of improved quality. So this is our SPC chart, which charts the progress of the whole project overall. Our baseline in September 2009, a huge amount of variation. If someone sent us a specimen, they didn't know if they'd get the result back in 1 day or even 40 days. Very wide limits, mean of 12 days. As the project progressed, the mean came down to 4 days. But more importantly, from a clinician and customer's point of view, the variation reduced. So they knew that when they sent a specimen to histopathology, they'd have a result back in 2 weeks. This is just to exemplify the special cause variation. This blip immediately catches the eye. And this was due to a batch of specimens that was left in the dermatology fridge and delayed in getting to pathology. You can use the SPC to show the impact of making a change or introducing an innovation, and this shows what happened when we introduced digital dictation into one of our processes. Okay, the final tool, A3 thinking. The word A3 simply reflects the paper size, which is the output of this process, and is really not the most important part of it. What's important is the process and the thinking that goes into the A3, and at Toyota this has become the standard format for problem solving. It's a simple tool, it's easily understood by all grades of staff. Everyone in our department, from the most junior to the most senior, can understand A3, how to go about it. They can look at an A3 and interpret it. And recently, the programme for junior doctors that we've run, we tasked them all to go away and do improvement projects in the format of an A3, and they very successfully did that. So it promotes understanding and consensus, and it's a visual representation of your PDSA or PDCA cycle, and it forces a very rigorous application of PDSA. So I won't dwell on this. You're all familiar with this cycle. This is how it correlates with the A3 document, and I'll go through this in slightly more detail. So the left-hand side of the A3 is about defining the problem. What is the problem? What is the impact on the patient? Can you quantify it? What is the current state? What's your baseline value stream map telling you? What's the baseline SPC? What is your goal? What are the wastes that you've identified? And root cause analysis of the problem. And there are two tools that we use for the root cause analysis. One is the Fishbone or cause and effect tool, which is pretty self-explanatory from looking at the picture. Again, the titles are generic. Depending on your process and your problem, you slot in the different variables. And again, a great tool for staff participation, because although when we did our first Fishbone, we did do it as a group. We were discussing it, but then after that, it was put up on the wall, and staff were free to put post-its up with the ideas they had about any issues that were affecting the process. The second tool is the 5 whys analysis. Again, the number is not important. It's the principle that if you have a problem, you keep asking why until you get to the root cause of that problem, and then you put in place a countermeasure rather than a containment measure. So the right-hand side of the A3 is about how you're going to combat the root causes, having a robust action plan with ownership of the actions and specific timescales, and then the assessment, the check and act. Has the problem been solved? Has your goal been met? What is the new standard work going to be, and how are you going to embed and sustain that? So this is just a summary of that. And this is an example of our A3. Starts life as flip chart paper, post-it notes, and a few charts. Once it's finished, you can put it into an electronic template, and it looks very pretty. So for more information on the tools, on case studies of how these tools have been used, I would refer you to this website, and there is also software available on the website through which you can generate your own SPCs and other tools as well. Thank you. Okay, the other presenters are now going to come up onto the stage, so if anybody's got any questions, we're happy to take them, but you'll need to walk to the microphone.
Questions, anybody from the audience? Well, we do have quite a few minutes left, so maybe I'll start the ball rolling by asking some questions. Now, in the US, lean is often mixed with Six Sigma. So if I could hear from the presenters on pros and cons of mixing up the two. But I see 2 people lined up at the microphone, so why don't you go ahead and ask your questions first, and then they can answer mine later.
Thank you for very nice talks today. We've been working at our clinic working with Lean for about 2 years, and one of the major difficulties that we have been facing is getting the involvement from doctors, especially the senior ones. Have you experienced anything with this? Do you have any good countermeasures?
I suppose I'd better try and answer that one, hadn't I, really? Having the right clinical leader, I think, was very important, and I think a lot of the change programmes that have gone through our hospital have taken a lot of time to actually choose the right senior clinician to be involved. And in our change programme, it's not just about the clinician, as Amber has said. We have all sorts of staff, but getting consultant buy-in is very important. I think I was relatively lucky in our emergency department that I've got a group of consultants who realised we had significant problems and wanted to change it. But I would go back to what we said at the beginning. It's about spending a lot of time explaining to people what it means, because as soon as you come up to a lot of consultants, and I can say this because I'm a consultant, and you talk about change, they literally do turn off. So we did spend many weeks, sometimes on a one-to-one basis, sometimes in a group basis, talking to my consultant colleagues and explaining exactly what it was all about and trying to remove the fear of a threat, being a threat to them. And it is difficult, and I say at the time we've got 16 consultants now, but at the time we only had 12, but we were lucky. We managed 7 or 8 of them were very thoroughly involved and championing it and very keen, and 1 or 2 who were less keen. I suppose it was confronting them to an extent and saying to them, you know, we are going to do this, all of our staff are involved in it, and if you really don't want to be engaged in helping, that's okay, it's disappointing, it's okay, but please don't scupper the project, because consultants are apparently very powerful people, and some of the things they can say can affect not only junior doctors and nursing staff. So we're really ensuring that they understood, and fortunately in my department, in the emergency department, that has worked very well. And I think in other departments in the hospital, they've again got the right sort of clinical lead, the right enthusiasm, and spent time doing it. But it does take time.
Yeah. I'm from Connecticut, United States. That is a great presentation and really wonderful. A quick question to you. We've tried different lean processes in our hospital. For some reason, there are some processes that has sustained change, and then others that just fall off. And more seems to be there is an immediate response, and which is very positive, and then it seems to fall off. How do you sustain this? All the changes that you presented were pretty short-lived, like 2 years, 2.5 years. How do you put this in a habit? We seem to be struggling with that. The ability to sustain this over time. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I can talk about it a bit. I mean, I see us as being very early on in our lean journey, although we've made the bulk of our improvement. We're still at the beginning, because I think it takes at least 5 to 10 years to even start to sustain and embed this properly. I think for sustainability and embedding, you need really good leadership, and that has to be clinical, coupled with managerial. You need senior executive support. Your trust board needs to be behind you in order for you to keep it going. You need to put in things in your day-to-day working in your department that are going to promote sustainability. So we have the daily huddle. That's a fixed part of the day. Don't let it go. There are other tools that I haven't talked about, like 5S and visual management. And if you've got those going on around you in the department with named individuals, named members of staff who are responsible for certain areas, and keeping using those tools and keeping it going, that all helps as well.
I was going to add, reciprocate the thing about the trust board. It can't just be the department on itself, on its own sort of thing. It needs to come from high-level management. But you've got to resource it. yes, we started 2.5 years ago. I'm no longer in post, but our change program, our continuous improvement continues. So it doesn't need me anymore, but the people who are the project champions, consultants, nurses, practitioners, receptionists, need resource. They need their time supported to do change. I listened to Dom Berwick speak when I was in Nice, and he said change was one of the hardest things you'll ever do in your career, and there's no doubt about it. I did it for 2 years full time, and it was the hardest thing I ever did in my career, but it was also the most rewarding. But I was resourced for 2 years full-time work to do it, and now we need to continue that resource of your project champions and your clinical leads to have time in their rota to work on their projects. Otherwise, it'll come crashing down.
Some of the principles of Lean are that you define standards. And as you said, standards often fall off. People stop adhering to the standards. And this has been true in medicine for a long time, trying to create quality standards. How do you keep people to it? Some principles that are used in Lean is to make it visible, processes visible, and very visible when processes are not being followed, and then auditing to the standards. Our director of Lean implementation, who came from the airbag manufacturer, said they worked on every new standard. They also embedded key times, whether that was daily, weekly, or monthly, to audit to the standard and to hold people to stay with the standard. And that's something that we didn't know when we first started. And so yes, you see it dropping off, but you have to think from the beginning, how are we going to maintain the standards?
I'm a consultant in emergency medicine at Wigan. And I wanted to ask, I've been using Lean and not really aware that I was using it. How did you go about getting trained in Lean? How long does it take to get the hang of properly? Some of you have mentioned you've had formal training. Is it something I can really get the hang of by going to the right websites?
It certainly wasn't a website for us. I knew nothing about it, and nor did Demas. And to be honest, the jargon turned us off, and I think before, when Demas was talking about getting consultants involved, using jargon just isn't the right terminology, and some of the lean words scared us. We were lucky. Nottingham University Hospitals bought into a whole hospital transformation program, and we were involved in the Productive Wards series with the Institute for 2 years before that. So with that, we had some champions in the hospital in our service improvement team who were trained up, and then Demas and I were lucky enough to have a consultancy company who came in and actually worked alongside us and taught us. Saying that, Productive Ward series in the Institute is lean, isn't it? Releasing time to care, reducing waste is all about lean, and I do believe people are working currently on the Productive Emergency Department series, so that might help you.
We used some materials from I think it was the Lean Enterprise Institute in Massachusetts. They have videos about, for example, how to make toast in an unlean way and in a lean way. I mean, some of these, there's lots of training materials and books out there. We read a book actually by a French author named, it's called The Lean Manager. It was more in the automobile, a story of lean being put in an automobile manufacturing plant in France.
I just make one comment. I mean, you can go and find out about lean, but I think you'll struggle doing it that way. I think you need the buy-in of the organisation. I mean, and our trust in Nottingham has invested millions of pounds, effectively, in this transformation programme to go out to the hospital. So it's, as we've heard, it needs to come from the top. So you need to get other people to believe in it, because trying to do it on your own, reading about it, fantastic, very worthy, but I think you'll really struggle to do the things, to change the culture on your own. I wouldn't have thought that was something you could do on your own. I think you'd need a lot of support and a lot of resource to come right from the top to actually really get it going in a significant and, importantly, sustainable way.
Any other questions? We do have 4 minutes left. Well, if there are no questions, I would like to thank our panel of speakers for a series of excellent presentations. I also thank them for being very lean and keeping to their time limits.
The only session today that's on time, right?
This is the only session today that's on time, apparently. Thank you all for coming, and I hope you have a good afternoon. Thank you very much.